I go to University of California, Irvine.
Louisiana State University.
George Mason University.
Case Western Reserve University.
Virginia Tech.
Universidad Francisco Marroquín, Guatemala.
University of South Dakota.
University of Ljubljana.
Tonight, a special edition of Stossel from the nation's capital. 1,500 college students from all over the world have gathered here to debate what makes for a free society. These are our future leaders. I'm glad they're learning about the most important thing, liberty, because students usually don't learn much about that in school. Tonight, what you ought to know about economic freedom, free speech, personal responsibility, drugs, privacy, and America's Constitution. StosselU, that's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
Thank you. You students are unusual. You're unusual because you have this special interest in liberty. Most people don't, which makes me wonder, how many of you ever discuss liberty on your campus? How many of your professors discuss it? How many of them discuss social justice? Many more. I'm not surprised given the love for big government in most campuses. Most of your professors probably don't even know much about basic economics, which is why we titled this show Stossel University. And our first professors tonight are Abby McCloskey and Don Boudreau. You're here to tell students what they should learn about economics. So you can't do it all. First thing.
First thing they should learn is that intentions are not results. You should judge policies by their results and not by their stated intentions. Second, people in the public sector are just as self-interested and no more enlightened than people in the private sector.
Just as nice or vicious as everybody else.
Absolutely.
But they're doing the public good. They're different.
That's what they say.
Some other ideas that are taught. Higher taxes can encourage work. Carl Smith, who teaches economics at the University of North Carolina, fine school, says, taxes make me poorer. When people are poor, they need to work more to pay for the things they want. Therefore, taxes should make me work harder.
When you tax something, you get less of it. So if you tax work, you get less of it. The same for investment and business. And this is why in countries with high taxes, like the United States, you see slow growth and slow job creation.
Can you believe that econ professors teach this stuff?
I wonder if Professor Smith would double his teaching load if UNC chopped his salary in half. I suspect not.
We had a credit crisis, so we got to regulate the banks. And Abby, you just testified before Congress on Dodd-Frank. This is the cure.
I did. So Dodd-Frank was passed in response to the financial crisis to protect consumers. But what we're seeing in practice is that consumers are having less access to credit and savings. Bank fees are at record highs. Over 3 million people have been shut out of the banking system. This is the law of unintended consequences.
Another appealing theme is we're Americans, we should buy America.
When Americans buy from foreigners, we get goods at lower prices, which is good. If you're concerned about inequality, you want poor people to have access to the lowest price goods. But when Americans buy from foreigners, we send money abroad. That money comes back to America as either demand for American exports or as investment in America. It's normally not seen by these people who don't know any economics, but it is definitely real, and it helps America.
But isn't it more patriotic if I buy American stuff?
No, because when you buy American stuff just for that sake, that means you are not employing resources as they should be employed. There's no reason you shouldn't choose the best deals that you can find. That's patriotic.
Income inequality, the theme of the day. And it is gross that some people have so much more than others. Shouldn't government try to even it out?
Government already does to a large extent. So the top 20% of earners pay 70% of taxes. We have a huge social safety net. I think what's concerning to me as an economist is not income inequality, but it's the fact that we have millions of people trapped in poverty from a broken welfare state, broken education system.
Finally, a Gallup poll found 78% of people your age support raising the minimum wage. I mean, most of the public does, more people your age do. So how many of you agree we should raise the minimum wage? All right, well, you clearly are libertarians.
If you raise the minimum wage, you're raising the cost to employers of employing low-skilled workers. When you raise the cost of something, you get less of it. It's as simple as that.
Now, I want to hear from you students. What questions do you have for Abby McCloskey and Don Boudreau? Take it away.
Okay. Hi, my name's Lauren Clark from Arizona State University. I'm currently studying journalism, so it's my dream to take over your show one day.
Please do.
So my question to you guys is, I'm also very interested in economics. Why is it that in the university sector, there's so many progressive people studying economics, when to me it's just reasonable sense?
You know, I wish I had a good answer to that question. I don't understand why people who don't get economics don't get it. It's like they're blind to realities. They're blind to the fact that gravity is operational.
But I also think, Don, they're not exposed to it. I mean, the majority of high school students aren't exposed to it, college students aren't exposed to it, and so you can't be held guilty for something you don't know.
Hi, my name is Skylar D'Angelo, and I study economics at the University at Albany. And my question to you guys is that when talking about income inequality, how do you find the most effective way to relay to people that it is government that is responsible for creating the disparity in the first place?
Wait. Government? Some people are smarter than others. Some people are born with a silver spoon.
Look, I think there certainly is crony capitalism, but I don't doubt that in markets, some people prosper more, income-wise. What I like to point out is that one of the great benefits of free markets is that while it may increase from time to time income inequality, it decreases consumption inequality. Rich people today do not consume much more than poor people today. In America, the difference between what poor people can consume and what rich people can consume is shrinking ever, they're getting a lot closer.
And you brought this catalog along to make a point about that?
Yeah. The typical American worker back then had to work 30 hours to buy this vacuum cleaner. Today, a typical American worker has to work only 6 hours to buy a much better vacuum cleaner. The poor are getting richer in America because of innovative capitalism.
Hello, my name is Sebastian Torres, and I study history at Eastern Kentucky University. And I just wanted to see what your personal opinion of Bitcoin was.
I'm all in favor of anything that competes with monopoly central banks. And I hope it succeeds.
Have you bought some?
I have not.
Have you? I have.
Hi, my name is Dan Dragellin. I go to Quinsigamond Community College in Obamacare's birth state of Massachusetts. And I was wondering if you guys believe that there's like a better alternative to social spending such as food stamps and Social Security.
So Milton Friedman had an idea, which is a negative income tax, that basically everybody would have a guaranteed level of income, and it wouldn't have the same distortions our current welfare system has. It discourages work or discourages marriage, for instance, and this level would be set low enough that people don't grow dependent on it.
Hello, my name is Michael Ashley. I'm a student at the University of Delaware, and what do you think is a good outline or effective measure of creating a small government that stays small?
One idea that's been proposed to keep government smaller is to link federal spending as a percentage of GDP and have an actual rule, so congressmen are held responsible for if they want to increase spending above historical norms. I think that's a good starting place.
Another idea is to repeal 5 rules every time you pass one, but can't get to that.
My name is Ken Williams. I am a political science student at Ohio University. In Obamacare, with where there's a distrust of the insurance companies because they want to make a profit, that the solution to that is to mandate buying from the insurance companies.
where the idea comes from, I don't know. It's a dumb idea. Insurance companies have incentives to provide the right mix of coverage at competitive premiums. The fact that Obamacare mandates this sort of coverage and that sort of coverage, that interferes with these private choices that would no doubt give rise to much better policies in the absence of these mandates.
Thank you, and we're out of time for questions for this segment. Thank you, Abby McCluskey, Don Boudreau. And if you at home would like to keep this conversation going, here's the Twitter hashtag, ISFLC. I don't know how you're supposed to remember that, but it stands for International Students for Liberty Conference, which is where we are. Let people know what you think. Coming up, what do you know about America's founding documents? I'll give you and our student audience a quiz. College students, a quick pop quiz. In the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and here it is, together, how many times is the word democracy used? Fewer than 5 times or 5 or more times? Who says 5 or more times here? Who says fewer? All right, well, you guys are educated. I didn't know this. It never mentions democracy. So you people should read this. And here you can have this. It's not very long. Our Constitution is shorter than the Constitution from most other countries. If you want one of these, you can get it from the Cato Institute. Cato.org on the web. But they charge you $5 for them. We give them out free. Question 2, true or false? The Constitution was prepared in secret behind closed doors, guarded by sentries. Is that true? Who thinks it's true? Yeah, well, you weren't so smart on that. This one is true. You better read this thing. To learn even more, now we turn to someone who really knows, Tim Sandifer, the author of The Conscience of the Constitution. You went to a liberal college where there was contempt for this. And I can see why. This is written by old white men, some of whom were slaveholders. Why should this be so important today?
Well, the Constitution of the United States is a promise about how government power will be used, and it's a promise that was left to us by a generation who had lived under tyrannical government and decided they needed a framework that would preserve the blessings of liberty for their posterity, and we should be very grateful for that.
But it's not relevant today.
It's true that the Constitution's promise has been broken time and time again by our government, but we are very fortunate that we can at least point to it and say, this is what the framework of our government was designed to do.
All right, the preamble says, secure the blessings of liberty. That to you is the most important part.
That's right. The Constitution says in the first sentence that liberty is a blessing. And as you said, it does not say the same thing about democracy or about government in general. The Constitution was written to protect liberty against government, whether it be a democratic form of government or any other kind of government.
But it also says ensure domestic tranquility. That could be speech codes, decency codes. It says promote the general welfare. Obamacare, take care of people.
But that's only within the framework of the liberty which the Declaration says we are all born entitled to. Probably the most important part of the Constitution is its limitations, the limitations on government. If you look at Article 1, Section 1, the first sentence there says, all legislative powers herein granted are vested in a Congress. A lot of people skip over that part. They think Congress has all legislative power or the power to do whatever's a good idea. And that's not what the Constitution says. It says all of the powers listed in the Constitution are given to Congress. So if it's not in the Constitution, Congress doesn't have the power to do that.
But they do it all the time.
That's true, they do. Unfortunately, the elected officials have a huge incentive to do whatever they think is popular.
And the Supreme Court, for the most part, hasn't stopped them.
A lot of the time, the Supreme Court has gone along with government overreaching, most obviously in the Obamacare case. So, for example, in Obamacare, what happened was the Supreme Court said, well, the government can't force people to buy things. Now, that was itself actually a huge victory for individual freedom. Can you imagine what would have happened if it had come out the other way? If Congress suddenly had the power to force us to buy whatever politicians think we should have. But the court said then, well, but we're still going to uphold Obamacare because, as Chief Justice Roberts put it, it's not the role of the courts to protect people from their political choices. And that's false. It is the role of the courts to enforce the Constitution, which is a limit on political choices.
All right, any Supreme Court cases you're happy with?
Oh, there are. There are some great Supreme Court decisions out there.
Pick two.
Well, the first one, in fact, it was when I fell in love with the Constitution, was when I was in 9th grade, and I learned about the court's decision in Tinker versus Des Moines School District, which was a decision that upheld the right of high school students to wear black armbands protesting the Vietnam War. And their teachers had told them not to do this, and they sued, and they said, we have a First Amendment right to do this. And the Supreme Court ruled in their favor and said, individual rights do not stop at the schoolhouse gate. And when I read that decision, I made my parents drive me to the county law library so I could photocopy the decision. This was in the days before the internet. And I felt, in that decision, I felt the Constitution...
You were an odd kid.
I was a nerd, can you imagine? I felt, when reading that decision, I felt the Constitution reach out and touch me and protect me and say, my rights couldn't be taken away by people trying to tell me what to do.
You also mentioned Lawrence versus Texas.
A Supreme Court case from only a few years ago, about 10 years ago I think now, in which the Supreme Court said that the government doesn't have the right to tell us who we can sleep with. There was a Texas law that made it illegal for two adults of the same sex to go to bed together in the privacy of their own homes. And the Supreme Court rightly said that that is obscene in a free country. And that is why I love the Constitution, because there are moments like that when really helpless minorities and individuals who can't expect the legislative process to respect their rights nevertheless have a shield in the form of the Supreme Court saying, no, this line is something that Congress and the states cannot pass.
Students, questions for Tim Sandefur?
Hi, my name is Ksenia Lebedeva. I recently graduated from Montclair State University in New Jersey. My question is, if the Constitution is the rule of law, so it's the rules for the government, and the government administers and enforces its own rules, how do we prevent them from breaking their own rules?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's one that the Founding Fathers thought a lot about. In the Federalist Papers, James Madison says, in creating a government that is to protect people, you have to create one that will protect them from the government itself. Now, Patrick Henry said at the Ratification Convention, he said, no, that's not going to work. The Congress is going to do all these terrible things. And when he was done, James Madison got up and he said, have we then no virtue among us? Because if we have none, we are indeed in a wretched condition. No system of parchment barriers or checks and balances can protect us then. Ultimately, the Constitution's promise only has the meaning that we give it when we honor that promise. So yes, the government has fallen away and ignored that promise on many occasions, but it's there for us to enforce as we go forward.
My name is Nathan Burning, and I studied communications at Indiana University. And my question for you is, what do you think is the best method to reverse the policies created by the surveillance state?
I think the best method to reverse policies is to elect new officials. But the best way to ensure constitutional liberty is secured is to enforce the Constitution, and that means sue, sue, sue. And I mean that sort of selfishly because my profession is, I sue the government for a living. It's the greatest job in the world. It's the greatest job in the world, and I do it for free. I don't charge my clients. And when you go to court and you make your argument and you insist, the Constitution says this, now it's up to you, judge, or you, Court of Appeals, or you, U.S. Supreme Court, to follow what's written there.
Thank you, students. Thank you, Tim Sandefur. Later in the show, given that most of your fellow students are left-wingers, we'll have a debate about the best way to argue with them. But next, this art exhibit, this picture of it, it's a sculpture of a sleepwalking man in his underwear is upsetting students at one college, and they demand it be removed. So should it be? That's when we come back. You students should be careful what you say. At your college, you might get in trouble if you say the wrong thing, if you offend people. Robert Shibley is with the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, FIRE they call themselves. So why do students need FIRE? On colleges, students are saying all kinds of stuff.
That's right, students are saying all kinds of stuff, but unfortunately, the fact is that on campuses across the country, they're actually taking a very big risk by saying those things. And it's gotten so bad that students are actually going so far as to censor themselves or demand that things on their campus be censored because they might make them offended or uncomfortable.
FIRE says 59% of higher education institutions have policies that infringe on our First Amendment rights.
Well, a few years ago it was 75%, so it's gotten better, but unfortunately we see these in policies all across campus.
And you list the worst colleges for free speech, State University of New York at Oswego, Harvard, University of Alabama. What did SUNY at Oswego do?
Well, this is a ridiculous case. We actually had a student who's a journalism student writing a story for the school paper and emailed the hockey coaches in the area saying, how do you find your relations with SUNY Oswego's hockey coach to be? And don't worry, not everything you say has to be complimentary. And one of those coaches forwarded that back to the administration, and they actually got this student in trouble for basically calling it threats, calling that something that you're not allowed to say on SUNY Oswego's campus, and he got in trouble simply for saying, well, not everything has to be positive.
Why is Harvard number 2?
They decided to read the emails of 16 of their resident deans because they were trying to figure out who was leaking information about a cheating scandal at Harvard.
At Brown University, New York Police Commissioner Ray Kelly was prevented from speaking.
Asking that you let him speak and you make your comments as part of the question and answer part of this program.
We're asking you to stop stopping and frisking people.
He eventually gave up and left the auditorium. And this happened to me at Brown. They pulled out my mic cord. And this is a liberal arts institution. They're supposed to hear all sides.
Well, this happens because we've actually trained students from K through 12 and into college to believe that certain views are so abhorrent that they shouldn't even be able to be spoken. In that case, about Ray Kelly, it had to do with the stop and frisk policies of the NYPD. So Ray Kelly had come down to give a speech to what he knew was going to be a hostile audience at Brown, and he also had agreed to take questions. But that wasn't good enough. And so these organized hecklers for 27 minutes disrupted the speech. He only got a few words out before it went on, and after 27 minutes he gave up and left. That is the very opposite of the sort of environment we're supposed to have on college campuses. They were going to have a Q&A session. If they objected to the policy, they had the chance to actually try to convince Ray Kelly that he was wrong, but they squandered that by instead engaging in this kind of vigilante censorship.
And at Wellesley College, what's the deal with the sleepwalker statue?
It's supposed to evoke a sense of empathy about, this sleepwalker, how he's vulnerable. Unfortunately, that's not how Wellesley students have seen it. They see it as a threatening image.
It's a girls' school.
That's right. It's an all-women's school, and they say it might trigger memories of sexual assault in people who see it because it's a man who isn't fully dressed. Other people have objected that they think its whiteness and maleness are a real imposition on campus. I think somebody called it discomfiting.
All right, but I'm going to push back and play the role of the university. We want people to learn. We want people to be comfortable. If it's an ugly climate, if I'm in your face and say, you're a big, fat, ugly, parasite lawyer, and I'm screaming at you, how can people learn? Shouldn't there be a civilized public square, especially at a university?
Well, civility is an important value, but it's not anywhere near as important as freedom. And the fact is, if we're training Wellesley students, this is an elite liberal arts college, if we're training them to be so afraid of a statue that they feel uncomfortable to simply walk around their campus and go to class and learn, then something has gone terribly wrong with our level of tolerance for the different views. And you're going to see, you know, white men maybe in their underwear sometime in your life. You can't let that throw off your entire lifestyle.
Thank you, Robert Shibley. Coming up, we'll talk drugs and privacy. But next, are you students getting ripped off by your college? I think many of you are. That's next. Welcome back to a special edition of my show from the Students for Liberty Conference in Washington, D.C. Now, I assume when you students graduate, you'd like to earn some money, get a job, but will you? Maybe your college is just wasting your time and your money. Camille Foster says you can't count on your college. You need to take responsibility. Foster is co-host of the new Fox Business program, The Independents, and you're an entrepreneur yourself, and you started in college.
I started a small telecommunications consulting firm. I spent about 10 years doing that. I did not, at the time, drop out of school. I went about 1-2 classes at a time, but I also didn't borrow a whole bunch of money in order to finance my education. I would go on from there to start 2 other small companies, one a new media firm that does film production, and another a retail and manufacturing company that makes camera accessories.
You just wanted to do this.
Just wanted to do it. And it's one of those things. I think it is increasingly true that your college degree is not necessarily preparing you for the kind of world that we all encounter. We've got a pretty significant unemployment problem right now. And a great deal of that has to do with the sort of policies that we're pursuing as a country, but some of it is structural. There are people who are graduating from college who are getting liberal arts degrees and don't have the sort of skills necessary to actually compete in the job market. They are not entrepreneurial enough, and it's just the sort of thing that's not really being taught at most universities.
And trying to be an entrepreneur, I find, is something that makes people understand the benefits of limited government. I don't know why you people became libertarians. I assume you didn't all start businesses. But a lot of people say, I had no idea this is what business people have to go through.
Interestingly, that is one of the things that makes me most optimistic about the future. It's that people have a pretty warm feeling about entrepreneurs in general, and more people feel like they can be entrepreneurs. There is an increasingly free agent culture, and there's something pretty wonderful that happens when more people have to make payroll, and when more people find themselves dealing with government bureaucracy in the most ordinary and regular ways, whether it's running your payroll and having to deal with the various tax agencies that you have to get records and numbers from. It's doing everything exactly the same way for a number of years and then finding out something was wrong and having someone come into your office to screw around with you for the space of 2.5 months. It's wasting 33% of your time in a fairly small company with 10 employees to comply with various burdensome regulations.
So we need more people to start businesses to wake up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And yet colleges are teaching people, you list some of the fun courses. Princeton has a course in getting dressed.
Yeah. because no one at Princeton could possibly master that on their own. Just couldn't happen.
University of California, San Diego, God, Sex, Chocolate, Desire, and the Spiritual Path.
Sounds delicious and wonderful. I mean, it's just...
University of Texas, Invented Languages, Klingon and beyond.
Yep. And it's amazing. I mean, when we think about college, what is it? It is folks paying $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year for an extra 4 or more years of adolescence. That's fine. It's nice. It's a bad idea to subsidize it with taxpayer dollars, and it's certainly a bad idea to take out loans in order to do that.
Thank you, Camille Foster of The Independents. And coming up, what school won't teach you about personal freedom, like, should I be allowed to open this little case? and do this. Welcome back to StosselU. This next class is about personal liberty. For time, we'll limit it to just 2 topics. The NSA creepily spying on us, and drugs, illegal drugs. So, how many of you have never used an illegal drug? Well, and including alcohol when you were not yet 21. Some of you, all right. Clearly a minority. The editor of my favorite magazine says once you're an adult, all substances should be legal. She's Catherine Mangu Ward of Reason magazine. So all drugs, every single one, crack, meth.
I think legal drugs are safer drugs, and that's probably the best place to start with your e-cigarette, which you so coolly smoked earlier.
I tried.
This is a safer product than a regular cigarette. That's because somebody figured out how to make money selling us drugs that we want to consume. The people who make money on drugs right now are people who are willing to operate in black markets, and I'd rather see it all out in the light of day.
And this is really just a substitute nicotine delivery system, no bad smell, it's just vapor.
So it exposes this weird puritanical element in the war on drugs. It's literally just, oh, you like that chemical in there and it makes you feel good? We don't want you to have it.
Well, I think they're also saying if we allow this sends the message that smoking cigarettes is okay.
Right, well, I mean, I think ideally we find ourselves in a world where the message that's sent is, using drugs, choosing what you want to put in your own body is your own business, but that we should hopefully let companies provide safer alternatives, provide more reliable alternatives to the black market drugs that are out there.
All right, but this is not what most of the time we're talking about when we're talking about illegal drugs. We're talking about the nastier ones like meth that really hurt people, lots of people. And well-meaning authoritarians say we can reduce the amount if we make it illegal.
And that's worked out so well so far.
They argue there'd be more of it.
You know, I'm sympathetic to this concern, like cocaine in vending machines. Is it the American way? Like, I get that that's an alarming concept to people, but I think if you look at the huge damage that the war on drugs has done, the disproportionate damage to black communities, students' lives ruined, the costs are huge, and it's not working. Heroin is cheaper now than it was 30 years ago.
NSA spying. When the NSA spying story first broke, I upset libertarians by saying that I wasn't that upset. I figured that my enemies already had all the information on me. My neighbor was stealing my emails through the air. Google, Facebook had the information. And I posted a list of 100 things that government does that upset me more than data mining, like our $17 trillion debt, corporate bailouts, rules against school choice. I don't say all those 100 things are as important as NSA spying or as potentially dangerous. It's just that I can understand the government's reason for wanting to do it. People want to kill us.
You know, that's true up to a point. But actually what we're seeing as more and more information is coming out about how incredibly extensive this data mining is, we're actually seeing not a lot of evidence that it works. I mean, you know, this is the old saw. If you sacrifice liberty for security, you get neither. And that's where we are right now. I actually love it when Google takes my data. I want Google to have all my data. If I could give my brain to Google, I would. But that's because Google gives me something I want in exchange. It gives me ads that are actually for products I want to buy.
NSA says it's giving you personal safety.
It gives me services. But the NSA says, I'm giving you personal safety, or I might put you in jail. Right? I mean, this is kind of the backstop, is Google can't put me in jail. The NSA can.
And let me poll the audience. Who agrees with her? Who agrees with me? Yeah, very few. I'm losing this. All right, your turn, students.
My name is Michael Lyons. I do political philosophy at the University of Arizona.
I'm diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and so I have a whole host of medicines that I take with a whole host of side effects. And for my concern, I don't think it's anybody's business how a drug interacts with my body. And so I don't think that it's beneficial to bring that to the light and so people understand sort of what drugs do for whom and how they interact with what. It's my business and not anybody else's. And to me it seems sort of counter-individualistic to sort of propose that I want to legalize drugs such that the entire body public can understand them, when it's frankly none of their business in the first place. And so that's my question to you, is how do you think that's cohesive with individualism?
I think individualists and libertarians should always favor letting knowledge be free. I think more information is good for individuals to make their own choices.
My name is Ryan Vacher. I am a freshman at the online high school, My Virtual Academy. How do we deal with the liberal bias in high school? Because there's a lot of it. I've dealt with it quite recently, learning about Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and it praises him like he's some sort of god, and he's not. He ruined everything. How do we deal with that? How do we communicate liberty and real freedom and all that into high school? So,
I think the first part of your question answered the second. If you're going to an online high school, you've already figured out how to opt out of the system. So, congratulations.
My name is Elizabeth Francis, and I'm a senior at Kansas State University. What are some things that maybe audiences back home could take to help advance personal liberty and work towards changing public policy?
Well, there's actually a great campaign out there that's just asks people who have smoked weed to be open about it, successful people. I think that's a great place to start. You know, I have a job at a bank. I smoked weed. I have a kid. I smoked weed.
Thank you, Catherine Maggie Ward. Coming up, most of you students attend liberal colleges. You have to deal with students and professors who love big government. How might you educate them? A debate on that next. If you learn anything at StosselU, it should be that the best type of government is limited government. These students understand that. Why don't other people get it? How can we convince them? Kathy Reisenwitz and Julie Borowski say they know how. Julie has a YouTube channel called Token Libertarian Girl. Kathy is editor of a blog called Sex and the State, which is a cool title. All right, so Kathy, you say to open other people's minds, libertarians should check their privilege. What does that mean?
Unfortunately, libertarianism is overwhelmingly dominated by straight, middle-income, well-educated white men. And so,
the overclass.
Right. And so I want to figure out how can we make libertarianism, if not appealing to other people, because that demographic is decreasing as a percentage of the population, at least get people not hostile to our ideas. There are certain things that you can't know on the basis of who you are. In order for you to really understand what, for instance, discrimination against, for me, men is like, I'm going to have to check my female privilege and listen to their experiences.
So for women, we should talk about things like making birth control available over the counter.
Absolutely.
For blacks, ending the drug war, allowing school choice. For Hispanics, opposing E-Verify, which would require employers to get permission from a government database before they hire anybody.
Like, just a story from my own personal life. I used to be prohibitionist, and it was because it really had genuinely never occurred to me that police were using drug laws to gather armed SWAT teams and burst down doors and carry people off to prison, and disproportionately people who don't look like me.
This seems like a reasonable argument to me, Julie, and you don't buy it.
Well, for me, the main component of libertarianism is individualism. We want to maximize freedom for every individual. What I've noticed with the privileged crowd is it's very divisive, it's negative, it's class warfare, it's jealousy.
And this check your privilege expression is a leftist college expression.
Well...
You've heard it too much?
Personally, I do not like the term check your privilege because I read YouTube comments and a lot of people say, check your privilege. I've never seen someone say, oh, you make a good point. Maybe I should check my privilege. People get defensive over it, and rightfully so, because someone's making a predetermined judgment about that person. I think it's downright rude.
And Kathy, it is not nice to divide people into categories. We're all individuals.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the reality is that racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia exist. I think that without acknowledging the real inhibitors to individual liberty for certain identities, that we're going to be kind of hampered in our ability to truly, as in my experience, advocate for them effectively.
And Julie, I gotta say, as I look around here, I see disproportionate white men in ties, even bow ties. They just look like the overclass. I would think this is a turnoff for lots of people.
There's a lot of white men here. I would say it has more to do with libertarianism being a bit nerdy than anything else, to be honest with you. And I'm a nerd myself, so I could say that.
All right, well, all this is food for thought. Audience, I want to ask you, whose argument is better? Who was more persuasive? Let's have a vote. Who sides with Julie, who says we should not argue by sex, race, and ethnic group? Who sides with Kathy and says we should? Fewer hands, but more noise. Anyway, I think you both make good points. Thank you, Kathy Reisenwitz and Julie Borowski, and thanks to all of you for attending StosselU. That's our show. Thank you at home for watching.